The dry Arizona desert stirred beneath Martha Doyle's boots as she moved steadily down the forgotten trail. Dust kicked up with every step, clinging to her sweat-stained uniform. Her red hair, tied back tightly, glinted under the relentless sun. 15 years in the Forest and Wildlife Service had sharpened her instincts. But that morning, something felt wrong, like the silence itself was watching her. At her side trotted Major, a battle-tested German Shepherd K9, his gear strapped tight, ears perked, nostrils flaring at something only he could sense. It started like any routine patrol, hot, quiet, still, but Major wasn't behaving like himself. He kept stopping, sniffing, then staring into the barren scrub like he was waiting for something. Suddenly, without warning, he bolted. His leash snapped from her hand. "Major, come back!" Martha shouted, breaking into a run. But the dog had already vanished in a cloud of dust, kicking up the dry earth like a storm in retreat. Her heart pounded, not from the sprint, but from that deep, unmistakable feeling that something was wrong. She followed his tracks uphill to a rocky clearing where she spotted him. Major was hunched over something, growling softly, pulling at it with his teeth. A large burlap sack, crusted in dirt and tied with rough rope, lay halfway buried under stones. Martha rushed forward, the smell hitting her first, a mix of earth, decay, and something sour that made her stomach turn. Major barked once, urging her on. With practiced hands, Martha pulled out her knife and sliced a cord. As the fabric peeled back, her breath caught. Inside, huddled together, were 3 puppies, filthy, shaking, but alive. Barely. They whimpered softly, eyes barely open, their tiny bodies pressed tightly together for warmth. For a moment, everything around her faded. No heat, no dust, just a fragile sound of life hanging on by a thread. Major sat beside her, silent now, his eyes fixed on the pups as if guarding something sacred. As she gently lifted them from the sack, something else tumbled out, a crumpled piece of paper, dirt-streaked and damp. She unfolded it slowly, her gloved fingers trembling. The message, scrawled in jagged handwriting, read, "Forgive me. I had no choice. Protect them. The truth is in the mother's eyes." Martha stared at the note. Her chest tightened. This wasn't just abandonment. It was a plea, a warning, or both. And from the distant ridge, a lone figure watched without moving. Back at the ranger outpost, the puppies were wrapped in warm towels, trembling in a crate beside a space heater. The station was small, just one room with a desk, a cot, a radio, and a wall lined with photos of rescued wildlife. Martha knelt in front of the crate, gently feeding the smallest puppy with a syringe of diluted formula. The others were nestled together, still too weak to move much. Major lay nearby, his eyes locked on them as if still guarding something unspoken. She couldn't stop replaying the words from that note. The truth is in the mother's eyes. There was no signature, no timestamp, just desperation. Martha had seen abandonment before. Animals dumped, left to starve, or worse. But this was different. Someone had placed these puppies in a sealed sack, left to die, but still had written a note begging for their protection. That contradiction gnawed at her. Whoever did this hadn't wanted them to be found, but they also hadn't fully given up. That meant something. And the mention of the mother, why? What truth? Martha walked to the back of the outpost, where an old corkboard hung on the wall. It held maps, reports, pinned warnings about illegal breeding operations, poaching routes, things most people assumed didn't happen out here. She ran her fingers across a faded flyer. Missing dog, female German shepherd, answers to Luna. The edges were yellowed. The photo showed a dog with striking eyes. She looked again, more closely now. Those eyes. A memory surfaced. Harold Hal Simmons, a former handler, retired from service 2 years ago. He'd lost his dog, a K9 named Luna, during a field operation gone wrong. Martha had met Hal only once, but she remembered the look in his eyes when he told the story. "She vanished like smoke," he'd said, voice cracking. That photo, it was Luna. Was it possible these puppies were hers? Her thoughts were interrupted by a sound at the window, a rustle, then silence. She stood quickly, peering out through the blinds, but saw nothing, just desert, dust, and fading sunlight. She took a breath and turned back toward the pups, only to find Major standing now, ears up, body tense. He was staring at the door. Before Martha could react, 3 sharp knocks echoed through the small outpost, cutting through the silence like a blade. No one ever came out here unannounced. Someone was watching. Someone knew she had the puppies. Martha's hand moved instinctively to the sidearm on her hip as she approached the door. Major remained frozen, his body a coiled spring, ready to protect. She paused, listening. Whoever was on the other side didn't knock again. Just the wind, just stillness. With one final breath, she opened the door slowly. Standing there, half in shadow, was a man, older, weathered, with a sun-beaten face and gray stubble. He removed his hat slowly, revealing eyes that were sharp yet tired. "Evening," he said, voice like gravel. "Name's Hal Simmons. I think you have something that belongs to me." Martha didn't answer immediately. Her grip tightened slightly on the doorknob. She knew his name, but not his story. Not really. "How did you find me?" she asked cautiously. "I didn't come here to cause trouble," Hal said, his gaze drifting past her shoulder. "I saw your report over the Ranger frequency. Heard about the pups. Then I recognized the markings you described. I think they might be Luna's." Martha stepped aside, but kept her posture guarded. Hal entered slowly, removing his gloves. As soon as he saw the crate in the corner, he stopped walking. His eyes softened. He moved toward it like someone approaching a grave. He crouched and stared at the 3 trembling puppies. One of them weakly opened its eyes to look back at him. He didn't speak for a long moment. Then, almost in a whisper, he said, "She was taken from me 2 years ago. She didn't run away." Martha stood silently, listening, letting him speak. "They said it was an ambush, illegal operation. I was injured. When I woke up, Luna was gone. No blood, no body, nothing. Just gone. I filed reports, tried to investigate. No one cared. Said it was just a dog." He turned and looked at Martha with fire in his eyes. "But she wasn't just a dog. She was my partner, my only family." Martha felt a crack form inside her. She'd known loss. She'd seen the bond between handler and dog. Major whined quietly, sensing the emotion in the room. The air grew heavy. Hal's voice dropped to a tremble. "Those eyes. That little one in the middle. She has Luna's eyes." Outside, the sun had slipped below the horizon, casting the station in golden shadow. But the storm building inside was far from over. Hal wasn't just here to visit. He was here for answers and maybe revenge. Hal sat at the edge of the cot, his elbows resting on his knees, the crate of puppies just a few feet away. Martha handed him a mug of instant coffee, not much comfort, but it was all she had. The silence stretched as he stared into the steaming cup, lost in thought. Major sat between them like a sentinel, eyes flicking back and forth. The flickering desk lamp cast long shadows across the room. And outside, coyotes howled in the distance. "She was pregnant," Hal said suddenly, voice distant. "I didn't know. Nobody did. She must have been just weeks in. When she disappeared, I thought she was dead. But if these pups are hers, that means someone had her. Someone bred her." Martha leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed, trying to process what she was hearing. "Do you have any idea who would have taken her?" "Someone from inside," Hal said, looking up slowly. "That's what I'm afraid of. There was talk back then about someone running a breeding ring off the books, selling trained dogs for combat or protection. Luna was worth thousands, loyal, smart, obedient. She would have never left unless forced. And now," he gestured toward the puppies. "This proves it. She was alive. Maybe still is." Martha felt her chest tighten. The note, the condition of the pups, the location, it all fit a pattern she'd seen before, but never had proof of. Over the years, rumors floated around the Park Service. Dogs disappearing. Strange sightings, unmarked vehicles spotted deep in restricted zones, but nothing ever stuck. No evidence, no names. She walked to her desk and pulled open a drawer, removing a file labeled Unsolved Cases, Wildlife Tampering. She tossed it on the table in front of Hal. "I've seen signs. I just never had anything solid. But now we do. That note, whoever wrote it wasn't just dumping puppies. They wanted you to find them. Or me. Maybe both. Hal opened the folder, flipping through faded reports and blurry photos. One picture made his hand freeze, a grainy trail cam image of a large German shepherd with a scar across her right flank. He stared at it for several seconds. That's her. Luna had that scar. Took it saving my life once. Outside, the wind picked up, rattling the loose metal on the roof. Inside, something else was shifting. Trust. Martha and Hal weren't just two strangers anymore. They were connected by something deeper now. And somewhere out there, Luna might still be alive. The trail cam photo clung to Hal's fingers like a memory refusing to fade. He traced the edge of the scar on Luna's flank with his thumb, his jaw tightening. She's alive. I feel it, he muttered. The photo was dated only 3 weeks prior, taken in a restricted part of the reserve. Section 12, a place marked in red on most ranger maps. Martha knew that area well. No one was supposed to be there. No hikers, no hunters, no patrols. But someone had been there, and Luna had too. Martha turned back to her desk, typing furiously on the old desktop terminal connected to the Ranger Service database. Her fingers flew across the keys, bypassing the standard logs and opening a hidden layer of reports. Her supervisor had told her to ignore Section 12 months ago, off limits for environmental safety, they said. But now it was clear something had been happening there. The data confirmed it. Movement patterns, power consumption spikes, unauthorized vehicle entries. Hal leaned over her shoulder. Coordinates right there, he pointed to a line on the screen. 34.903, 6 degrees north, 111.7703 degrees west. That's where we go. Martha hesitated. We don't have backup. I can't get approval to go out there. Not officially. She looked at him, her voice low. If we do this, we do it alone. He nodded. No one's coming. They packed quickly. Martha slipped her service radio into her vest, but didn't bother calling in. She knew better. Hal pulled a weathered duffel from his truck. Inside were old field tools, binoculars, and a sidearm from his days in service. Major, sensing the shift in energy, moved with silent urgency, tail stiff, nose twitching toward the door. The crate with the pups was left behind, safe and warm with a timed heater and food. As the desert night deepened, their truck cut to the darkness, heading toward the forbidden zone. The headlights barely pierced the blackness beyond the dirt road. In the passenger seat, Hal clutched the trail cam photo like a compass, as if Luna herself was guiding them back to her. Martha drove in silence, her eyes sharp, her thoughts louder than the engine. There was more to this, the note, the abandoned pups, the hidden section of the forest. It was a web, and someone somewhere had been pulling strings for years. They didn't know what they'd find out there. But the truth was waiting. The truck slowed as it approached a rusted metal gate. Chain shut. A crooked, "No trespassing" sign was barely visible under the beam of the headlights. Dust swirled around the tires as Martha killed the engine. Silence enveloped them. No wildlife sounds, no wind. Just the subtle ticking of the engine cooling and the tense rhythm of their breathing. Major sat up straight in the back seat, ears alert, body still. He sensed something before they even stepped out. Hal got out first, flashlight in hand. He moved to the gate and studied the padlock. New, he said. Industrial. Somebody doesn't want company. Without hesitation, he pulled a pair of bolt cutters from his bag. One clean snap later, the gate creaked open like a coffin lid. Martha hesitated before following. The land beyond felt wrong, not just dangerous, but tainted. Trees too quiet, soil too dry, a space that had seen things it shouldn't have. They hiked in silence for half a mile before the first real sign appeared. Tire tracks, recent, embedded in soft dust. Martha crouched to examine them, brushing the dirt aside. Military grade, she whispered. Wide base, heavy load. Hal nodded grimly. They're running operations through here. Then, in the distance, just beyond the tree lean, the faint glow of artificial light flickered. Not lanterns, not campfires, power-driven, controlled. As they crept closer, they reached a ridge that overlooked a small compound. Three structures camouflaged beneath mesh netting, surrounded by temporary fencing. Through her binoculars, Martha saw figures moving. Two men in black tactical gear stood near a kennel enclosure. And then she saw her, a female German shepherd pacing inside a lock cage, her coat dull, her ribs visible but unmistakable, even from that distance. Hal knew. "Luna," he breathed. The moment hit him like a bullet. He dropped to one knee, struggling to breathe as years of guilt, helplessness, and loss boiled to surface. Martha placed a hand on his shoulder, grounding him. She's alive, and she's not the only one in there. Through the scope, she counted at least 6 other dogs in cages, some limping, others too exhausted to move. This wasn't just a hiding place. It was a trafficking hub, a pipeline. Hal's eyes burned. "We're not leaving without her." Martha didn't argue. Her jaw was tight, and her eyes locked on the entrance to the compound. Then we go in quiet, fast, no mistakes. Below them, a motion sensor light flicked on. They weren't the only ones watching. Martha signaled with 2 fingers and began moving down the slope, her body low, each step calculated to avoid dry twigs and loose gravel. Hal followed behind her, slower but steady. Major stayed tight to Martha's right, his breathing shallow, his body tense like a coiled spring. The compound below was quiet again, the motion sensor light already off. But that brief flash had changed everything. They knew now their presence was entirely undetected. They reached the perimeter fence, crouching behind a pile of discarded crates. Martha took in the layout again. 3 prefab buildings, one larger than the others, likely the main office or control center. The kennels were off to the left, partially shielded by tarps and fencing. 2 guards patrolled lazily, one sipping from a thermos, the other checking a clipboard. No uniforms, no badges. This was off the books, completely illegal and far more organized than either of them expected. "I count at least 12 dogs total," Martha whispered. "Some look injured, malnourished. Luna's in the last pen on the far side." Hal nodded, rage simmering just beneath his worn face. He'd been in raids before, back in the day. But seeing her like that in a cage after believing she was dead, it twisted something deep in him. "What's the play?" he asked. "We create a distraction," she said. "I circle to the right. You go in through the south side, cut the kennel locks, and get the dogs out. I'll draw the guards away toward the trucks. Major stays with you." Hal started to object, but she cut him off. "He'll keep you alive. Trust him." Major looked up at Hal as if he already knew the plan, as if he agreed. Hal took a deep breath, then nodded. They moved. Martha slipped into the darkness, disappearing between shadows like she'd done 100 times before. Hal and Major crept to the fence line near the kennels, crouching low. He could hear the soft whining of the dogs, the clink of chains. His hands shook as he pulled a multi-tool from his pocket. One locked down, then another. The dogs, sensing freedom, stayed oddly quiet, as if they knew noise would cost them dearly. Then a sharp crack echoed across the compound, metal slamming against metal. One of the truck doors had been forced open. A guard shouted. The other ran toward the noise. Martha had made her move. Hal sprang into action, cutting Luna's lock last. She looked up at him, and for a second, it was as if time rewound. The scar was still there. So were her eyes. She remembered him. Luna didn't hesitate. The moment her gate swung open, she stepped out, her body trembling with exhaustion, but her instincts alive. She looked up at Hal, sniffed his hand, then pressed her head against his chest. A gesture so brief, so full of memory that Hal nearly broke. "I got you, girl," he whispered, blinking hard. Around them, the other dogs were moving now, too, some limping, others still unsure. Major weaved to them like a guide, nudging and herding with precision, as if he understood they had only seconds. Gunfire shattered the silence. A shot rang out from the main building, striking a metal pole near the kennels. Sparks flew. Hal dropped low, shielding Luna. One of the guards had spotted them. "Go!" Martha's voice cracked through the air. She was running full tilt from behind the truck, drawing fire as she went. The distraction worked. One guard peeled off in her direction, but the second stayed, taking cover behind a crate and aiming at the dogs. Major lunged. In one explosive motion, he tore across the open ground, tackling the guard with enough force to knock the rifle from his hands. They struggled for only seconds before Major pinned him, teeth bared, growling with a fury born from instinct and training. Hal rushed in, zip-tied a man's wrists while breathing hard. "Good boy," he whispered to Major, who immediately turned back to the pack, now forming a loose group near the fence opening. Inside the compound, Martha had found cover behind the truck. She fired a warning shot, striking the ground near the second guard's boots. He dove for cover, radioing frantically into a device clipped to his chest. Reinforcements. They wouldn't have much time. She sprinted toward the group, reloading as she ran. "We have to move now," she shouted. Hal didn't wait. He whistled sharply, a command from the old training days, and Luna responded, rallying the others to follow. They ran through the broken gate into the darkness, paws kicking up dirt, breath hot in their lungs. Martha stayed behind just long enough to grab the guard's radio before tossing it into the kennel wall. It exploded in sparks, the battery igniting on impact. Flames licked up the mesh walls of the compound, growing fast. It wouldn't burn long, but it would burn enough. As they cleared the ridge, the smoke rising behind them, Hal looked back one last time. That place had stolen years, had buried truth. But Luna was at his side now, alive, and the real reckoning had just begun. The convoy of dogs moved quietly through the desert, lit only by the faint glow of Martha's flashlight. Some limped, some had to be carried, but they moved together like a pack rediscovering its freedom. Hal walked at the front, Luna glued to his side, her gait slow but steady. The fire behind them had consumed the compound's outer walls, but the truth it had exposed was still smoldering in their minds. No one spoke for miles. There was only breath, paw steps, and silence. By dawn, they reached the ranger outpost. Martha unlocked the door with a trembling hand, exhaustion written into her every movement. Inside, the heater hummed and the rescued pups, still in their crate, stirred at the sound of returning voices. Major immediately went to them, sniffing each gently before curling beside the crate, like a soldier at rest. Luna followed, lowering herself beside him, the two dogs exchanging a moment of quiet understanding. Hal collapsed into the old desk chair, his body aching, his thoughts even more so. "This whole time," he muttered, "they had her. They broke her, used her, and no one cared." His voice cracked at the last word. Martha sat across from him, a first aid kit in her lap. She said nothing at first, just listened. Then she placed something on the table between them, the torn piece of the guard's radio. "I pulled this before it burned. It was connected to a private channel, encrypted." She hesitated, then pulled a USB stick from her pocket. "I copied the log before we left." Hal stared at it. "You think we can trace it?" "We already did," she said softly. The signal bounced from a nearby communications tower owned by a private security firm. Guess who's on the board? Hal blinked. Your old supervisor, the one who shut down the investigation when Luna disappeared. It was internal. Hal, this whole time it was someone inside. The silence between them thickened like smoke. Hal looked away, his hands clenching the arms of the chair. "She trusted us," he said. "She saved lives, and we let her rot in a cage." Luna, hearing the strain in his voice, rested her head on his foot. He looked down, eyes shining. "But not anymore." Martha nodded slowly. "We'll go public. We have evidence now, dogs, documents, photos, a confession if we can get it." She looked over at the pups. "And we have them. Living proof." Outside, the first rays of sun bled across the desert. Morning had come, but the storm wasn't over yet. 3 weeks later, the outpost looked different, brighter, lived in. The scent of fresh coffee mingled with the subtle smell of antiseptic and dog shampoo. The once empty kennels now held temporary crates filled with recovering dogs, fed clean and slowly learning how to trust again. Volunteers from neighboring districts had come to help after the story broke across national news. "Illegal canine operation uncovered by ranger and retired handler." The headline read, But what the world didn't see were the quiet moments that came after. Hal stood in the early morning light, tossing a ball gently across the field. Luna, her coat fuller now, bolted after with a speed that surprised even him. She still bore the scar. She always would, but her eyes had changed, no longer dulled by captivity. They now carried that fierce brightness again, the one he remembered from all those years ago. She ran back toward him and dropped the ball at his feet, tail wagging. He laughed, low and honest. "You never gave up on me, did you?" Inside the office, Martha sat at her desk, finalizing her report. The USB had provided more than enough data for a formal investigation. Her former supervisor had resigned 2 days ago. Federal agents had raided a second facility in Utah, linked to the same operation. The fallout was far from over, but it had begun. She looked at the small photograph on her desk, her and Major, taken last summer during a rescue op in Sedona. He lay now near her feet, peacefully asleep, but one ear remained perked, always listening. The 3 rescued pups, now named Dusty, Hope and Scout, had grown stronger. Hope, the smallest, had been adopted by a retired veterinarian. Dusty and Scout were scheduled to go to a therapy dog training program. What began as a near-death experience in a burlap sack had turned into a second chance, not just for them, but for everyone involved. Later that evening, Martha, Hal, and a small group of rangers gathered by a fire pit outside the outpost. No speeches, no formalities, just quiet stories and the sound of the wind moving through the brush. Luna rested her head on Hal's lap. Major curled next to Martha. The stars above burned bright, like scars that chose to shine anyway. As the fire crackled, Hal looked over at Martha. "You think they remember?" he asked, nodding toward the dogs. Martha smiled, warm but sad. "I think they remember everything, but I also think they forgive faster than we do." And for the first time in years, Hal believed